Hi, my name is Ann Elliott, creator and founder of HomeschoolingTorah.com, and welcome to my home. I hope you will grab a drink, pull up a chair, make yourself comfortable, and most of all, get your Bible because we're going to need it today. We're on day 2 of our 2022 Homeschool Family Conference, and today we're going to talk about the basics of assessment. How do we even know if our kids are learning, and how do we prove it? So in this video, we're going to talk about how to teach multiple ages and actually know that all of them are learning and are on target for what they should be learning at their age level and grade level. We're going to be talking about how to assess our children, how to give them grades, how to give them tests and quizzes, how to make a portfolio, and how to place them, if you're a Homeschooling Torah member, how to place them into our curriculum so that you'll know they're at exactly the right level. So let's get started. First of all, I hope you were here yesterday for our very first few sessions. And in session 2, we talked about the basics of how to learn and how to teach your children and know that they're learning. So that's a really important video, and I hope that you will not miss it because I'm going to review a little bit here, but you want to go back and grab some of those concepts that we talked about. And first of all, let's remember what we talked about yesterday. How do we know that our children are learning, and how can we really cement that learning in? The interesting thing is that researchers have found that review and bringing things back up to the top of our memory is what helps it stay there. In other words, quizzes and tests and review and flashcards and memory work actually really are the foundation of learning, and we want to make sure our children have that skill. And that's just something that is really interesting. I didn't used to think that. As a homeschool mom, I used to think that tests were really not necessary. And in fact, there are some uses of tests that aren't the best. So let me go over some of the purposes of testing, and let's find the good ones and get rid of the bad ones. One of the main reasons of testing is for our government. They need to make sure that our children are being raised up as good citizens of this country. That may or may not be your goal. I, for one, believe that I am a citizen of a heavenly kingdom that is going to be coming here to earth and being set up here on earth. And that's the kingdom I want my children to be trained for and prepared for. I do want them to be good citizens of that country. And that's a huge reason why the Torah forms the foundation of our homeschooling, because the Torah is the foundation of the government of the country to which I actually belong. Having said that, I have a dual citizenship. I am a citizen of the United States, and according to Romans chapter 13, I am to be subject to the powers that are above me here in the United States. And I don't really like that all the time. I don't agree with everything that the United States is doing, but Romans 13 does make it very clear I am to be subject to them. For the powers that be are ordained of God, is what it says. And therefore, if I am not subject to them, I'm in rebellion against God himself who put them there. That's a really interesting concept, but I don't need to try to make them good citizens of the United States. I simply need to make them good citizens of the eternal kingdom. And if I do that, they'll also be good citizens of whatever country they live in, because they'll just be simply good people. They'll have morals. They'll know how to love their neighbor as themselves. They will know how to self-govern and to make sure that they are always considerate of others, that they take care of the property and things that God has given them and treat it right, and they're wise stewards of that. See, all of these things make good citizens. So if I teach my children the Torah, they're going to be good citizens. That is a big reason why the government requires testing, though, because they want to make sure that the parents in their realm, okay, of their kingdom, are doing what is necessary to make sure that their children grow up to be responsible citizens. So they test because they don't take our word for it. So whether we like it or not, and no, I don't really like it, they are going to require it. Another reason is for the safety of the children that live in a nation, because sadly Our world is sick and messed up and sinful and evil, and a lot of children are not safe and are not being raised correctly, and are not being taught, and are not being fed, and are not being cared for, and that's against Scripture. So let that never be true of our children. Let our children be the most healthy, safe, and secure children that exist, that they are given the proper nourishment, exercise, and love, that they are disciplined and taught and instructed, and above all, at peace in their homes and very happy. That should be our goal. So again, it's not really a concern of mine that the government cares about these things, because I also care about these things for a different reason, though. So having said that, it's not really their job to poke their nose into our business, except for the fact that I want you to think about this. When Yeshua reigns as king on this earth, and he rules with a rod of iron, which according to Scripture he will be. What is a rod of iron? That means he's going to enforce his Torah whether people like it or not. So if you put yourself in the shoes of someone who doesn't like Torah, and doesn't care about Yeshua, they're going to have to bow the knee to him and do what he says, and it will be enforced. And they're not going to like that very much. It sounds a little bit like a dictatorship. I don't know exactly how he's going to run it, but I do know he's going to require it. So, in a way, it is the place of a king of a nation to know what's going on with the children. It says in Isaiah that all our children will be taught by Yehovah, and great will be the peace of our children. So we know this is going to be a good thing, but sometimes we just rebel against authority for the sake of it being authority, and no one should be allowed to tell us what to do. Yeah, they are allowed to tell us what to do. Yes, they are. The problem is not that they're telling us what to do and that we have to submit to them. The problem is that they're doing it wrongly, and they're telling us wrong things to do. And that's when we have to ignore them. When they say things that go against God and his word, we have to ignore it. So having said that, the first purpose of testing is for the government to know that we're actually doing what they're asking us to do. So they're going to ask us to prove it. I strongly recommend that you go to Homeschool Legal Defense Association.org, which let me say that as an acronym, because that's actually what you have to do. HSLDA.org. Click on your state or country and find out what the laws are, and that becomes your baseline that you must do in order to be obedient to God, because he says that you are supposed to be in submission to authority. So the second reason for testing, to report. Okay, so you can't tell anyone else what's going on in your home if you haven't done any kind of testing to help that be obvious to them. So oftentimes we as parents feel that this is our main job and the reason we do grades, but it's not. Yes, we do have to report to others, whether it's the government, whether it's a co-op that we're part of, whether it's an umbrella school that might be helping you legitimize your homeschooling. And you don't have to have those things, by the way. I don't. But if you feel led to do that and feel it's the best decision, you're going to have to report to them. Or maybe it's grandma and aunts and uncles and cousins and people at your congregation that are asking legitimate questions for their concern for your children. Or maybe they're just nosy and annoying. And so anyway, you have to report. And it's nice to have real things to tell them. Like, we had a spelling test this week and he got a 95 on it, and I'm so thrilled with how he's doing. So I guess we do have to report those kinds of things. Sometimes we don't, but we can be strategic about it when the people are just being kind of nosy and they want to know, but we don't really want to share. There are things that we can share that will make them feel better and calm down some of that nosiness. Okay, so if we're too exclusive and reclusive, they sometimes are going to ask a lot more questions. Sounds like I have a train coming, which means that we're going to have to give out a discount. So there's going to be a coupon code that is going to be effective until the end of today, and you're going to be able to get a discount over at foundationspress.com. But meanwhile, I'll be back when the train is over. So there's another reason that we want to test often as parents, and that's because we want to keep moving through the content. So we have 180 lessons in our curriculum, and we want to get from lesson 1 to lesson 180, and we want to do it and stay on schedule. So one of the reasons we test is because that's just what you do at the end of a chapter, right? And then you keep moving. And I don't really know that that's the best reason, because while it works and you can assign grades, and it's definitely what you have to do in a classroom when you have a lot of children, because you have to keep going. You just have to. But it's not necessarily the best and most effective way for our children to learn. And that's the kind of testing we all remember. And sometimes, you make a C or a D on a test because you just didn't know the information very well, but never mind, we're going to go on to the next chapter. And at the end of the year, all those grades are averaged together, and you might have gotten a B-. And so the frustration I have with that is I want my kids to all be A students, not because I want to be proud, although as a parent I'd like to know that I've really well educated my children. That makes me know that I've done the job I'm supposed to do as a parent. But having said that, I want them to be A students because I actually want them to know the information. I mean, I'd rather we went through less information and they knew it well than to get it all crammed in. So anyway, that's where we usually assign grades for things. And I have to ask myself, do those tests at the end of every chapter, those periodic cumulative reviews and semester exams and so on, do they actually motivate learning? Sometimes it motivates students, and that's why teachers do tests, because some students really are motivated. I might have been one of those when I was a kid. I loved to see a big red A at the top of my paper. It felt great. And there is an aspect that we like to be rewarded for what we've been working hard for. And your children like to be rewarded too. I don't think there's anything wrong with a reward, since the Father rewards us. He says, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord." So he's going to give something joyful and happy to those who do well. So I don't think it's bad to be rewarded. I don't want that to be my only motivation, but it's definitely a legitimate one. Another reason classrooms have to sort students out. Sometimes they're sorting them out because they're only looking for the best, and everybody else that's not an A student kind of falls through the cracks. Other times they're sorting them out because there are good teachers in this public school world that actually do want to help kids that may not have gotten an A. And so they're sorted off into maybe a special education class. Maybe the advanced ones are sorted over here so that they can go faster than the average. And you're sorting them into all of these grade levels. And the idea is that you can then work with those particular students that are all kind of similar and really help them excel. That's the idea. I know we all know the real world where students are teased because they're put in this group or that group. Whether they're super smart or super not as smart, they are teased and bullied often. So sadly, our human nature, the best motives, I don't think they actually work. But you don't need to sort your children because you only have a few of them. You can just look at them and know where they're at. And there's no need to sort. However, sometimes a test can help you identify a weakness, and you don't have to make a big deal about it, but mentally you can note that weakness, and it's an area you can work on. I wouldn't freak out. Definitely not. Every one of us has weaknesses in many things. And so it's not that, oh my goodness, my child is really struggling in reading. We've got to get him labeled and find some psychologist that's going to help him. Maybe not. You might just need to just give it a little extra effort. It's not necessarily something to get all worried about or make your child feel less than over. It's just not necessary. Let's praise them for the things that they do really well and reward them, and let's just work as a team to build up their weaknesses, okay? So another reason, though, that is absolutely essential is to help your children retain what they've learned. And this is what I want to focus on today. Testing your children and helping them bring up what they've already studied, bring it back from the back parts of their brain, and my goodness, I just realized I am not even looking at the video. Well, that was a beautiful view. Let's see if we can fix that. It's been one of those days. So anyway, we were talking about bringing up what your children have learned from the recesses of their brain and bringing it to the front of their mind. It's very good testing has been proven in research that it is more effective than almost any other tool in helping your children actually retain what they're learning. And this is the bit of research that I've been studying this year and has been making me go, I don't think I've been doing this like I should. So I want to work on that for this next school year, and I think we could do it together. What we're finding, and I wore this this bracelet today and this string of pearls around my neck for a reason, not to be annoying or to click the microphone or to just show off, things. But I wanted to talk about beads on a string. When your child is learning, let me see if I can even get this off. When your child is learning, it's almost like a test or a quiz is a knot at the bottom that holds the beads. And if you don't have those tests and quizzes to knot as you go, then research has shown that about 60% of what a child has learned will completely fall off very quickly from the string of their learning. And about 30% will be left. And if you can imagine, I'm sitting over a table right now and I dropped these quickly, a lot of them would fall and a couple would be left. So that makes so much sense to my brain. And I thought that would make sense to you too. So what we need is a way for your child to learn to retain the information that they talked about yesterday. And as they retain it, they've tied a knot so that the beads can't fall. That's what research has shown. It's super cool. So retrieval makes information stick better than just re-exposing them to the original material. So I wouldn't have known that. I would have thought if we can read, let's say I'm doing my Bible reading and I read Genesis 1 through 10. Tomorrow, I would have thought that if I reread Genesis 1 through 10, I would retain it better. But actually what has been proven is if I read Genesis 1 through 10 and then tell somebody without looking at it what I learned, even though I might miss a lot of things, some facts, I will remember that so much better than if I just simply reread it. So let's say it's in math. Let's say that we are learning the 6 times tables. I explain it, we might show, grouping things together to get that, and then I kind of quickly tell my children what the facts are. But if I just come back to that lesson tomorrow and we regroup the same things into groups of 6 and we put these little piles and I'm explaining the concept to my students, yes, they're going to have some memory retention, but it would not be anywhere near what they would do if I got out flashcards and started just drilling them every single day. Well, that sounds so boring. Nobody really wants to do that. But yet it's been proven that as we bring up what we learned and immediately have to say it, even though we may get some wrong, we will remember much better. And of course you could correct where they got it wrong and fix it. This reminds me of our Hear, Learn, Keep, Do method, which we talked about in the earlier video, so I won't go into that as much, but I have to hear it, I have to replay it, but the replaying is not as essential as the keep, the guarding, which I have to bring it back up again and again. And flashcards is the best illustration of what I'm saying, or simply rote memory is excellent for actually retaining information, and having to do it on a test has been proven to be the best, which is crazy to my mind. This is rarely used as a learning tool in schools. It's used really just to, like I said, sort students out by grade or by ability level and put them in with their special groups, or to report. But it's not really used as a tool to help our students learn. And that's what I hope you will do, is don't see testing as something I just have to do for the government, but see it as something I'm doing to actually help my students learn and be able to retain that information for the rest of their lives. That's absolutely so much better. However, memorization is highly criticized in the educational world, and absolutely true in the homeschooling world as well. And you're going to see a lot of criticism of it because it sounds as if when you're memorizing something, you're not critically thinking and participating with it. Like you're not analyzing it, you're not being creative, you're not having to problem solve. And that's not necessarily true. You can do all of those things as you introduce a concept, and you can do those things as you quiz and test and you find your students make a wrong answer. You should then take that wrong answer and let's do some problem solving to find out what the right answer would be. And here's another thing. We've found through research that as children have a base of facts at the bottom of their brain, you could say, it's not really how it works, but it's a base of facts, then from that base of facts, they are able to go out into the world and apply it. It's almost like Well, you can't apply if you never had the base there in the first place. Like, it's impossible. So yes, I know we can look things up, but what if we don't have access to that? And what if your students don't even have the basic skills needed for that? The base of knowledge is necessary to continue learning and to be able to be creative and to make good analysis and all of the things that are said to be a really important goal. And that's so fascinating to me that the research bears this out, the secular research. So it's not just that we're thinking about how the Father would give commands to his servants and then ask them to say them to their children as they went about their day, but he would also test them in the wilderness. And they failed a lot of tests, but while they failed tests, they were learning yet again what the commands were. And our children don't have to get all the answers right. That's not what I'm saying. We can use those wrong answers as a learning opportunity. So basically what research has shown is that your children should recite what they have learned about 60% of the time. So if you have a lesson that's an hour long, you basically want about 2/3 of it to be review. Wow, that is not how I've done it. I really haven't, and I want to be different. So let's say that 2/3 of an hour would be 40 minutes and only 20 minutes that you're introducing new information. Now, you don't have to have hour-long lessons. I actually don't believe in it. But let's break that down. So if you have a 30-minute lesson, 10 minutes of it would be new information and 20 minutes of it would be review. If you had a 15-minute lesson, 5 minutes of it would be new and 10 minutes of it would be review. Wow, that is not how we usually do it. What you want to do is review at the very beginning of a lesson what you learned yesterday, and then start in with the new content, have a lot of discussion, and immediately test them. They have found through research that if you have a short amount of time before that first test, not long at all, that more is retained than if you wait until tomorrow or wait until an hour or two, or even worse, in like a college situation, they wait until the mid-semester to even test for the first time. That has been proven to not actually help students learn at all. And for a student that was stuck in a situation where that's happening, they can test themselves or test, get in a study group and test each other. But a wise teacher is going to be constantly having testing going on with her students. Now, I'm not talking about a test where you have to write all the answers down, but you could. So for instance, spelling. Let's test the students at the beginning, see what words they know and don't know. That helps us, and it also helps them. And then let's teach the lesson. Let's help them learn how to spell, and then let's immediately test them at the end of the lesson. And that would be a written test, or you could have to spell it out loud. Either one works. And then tomorrow, before diving in again, test again. Does that make sense? So we have a lot of review, is what I would normally call this. As far as the very cream of the crop of research, it's showing that multiple tests are the best. 3 is the best. So if you only test your students on some information once, they will retain a small percent, between 25 and 35%. If you test them twice over that information, so you're spacing these tests out over days, or maybe even hours, it just depends on the topic. But spacing it out they're going to retain about 50 to 70%. And if you are testing them 3 times, they're going to be retaining massive amounts, like 80% and more of the information that you gave them. So it's just incredible. Now, Homeschooling Torah, I'm going to be honest, I don't think we have enough tests. And by tests, I don't mean necessarily written tests, but you definitely could have written tests. So what I'm going to do is, my goal is over the next 4 to 5 years, okay? And it's going to take me as long as it takes me. I want to go back through our materials and add more and more. Now, in some subjects, we have a good amount now, such as our math and our language arts, but I don't think we have enough over in history and science and even Bible. So I'm going to add that to it. So that's something I'm working on. But what can you do while you're waiting for Ann Elliott? Well, first of all, I want you to get a yellow highlighter, and I want you to start highlighting in the book. Let's talk about history, because that's going to be my example for a second. You're reading in Christine Miller's book, Story of the Middle Ages, and as you're reading as a mother, I want you to ask yourself, what of what I just read on that page would I want my children to remember? And I want you to take a highlighter and I want you to highlight it. One of the things I want to do in the years ahead is help you by highlighting some of the things that I think would be wise. But even when I put my input in by highlighting them in the text that we're going to be revising, you might think of different things than I do. And you're the teacher, and you're the parent most of all. So highlight. always be thinking, what would I want my child to actually remember? And it doesn't matter if there's a lot of things on that page, that's okay. Then when you get to the end of that page that you're reading, stop for a few minutes and quiz your students over the things that you highlighted. In other words, go back and ask them, what about this? Or you could even say, what are 5 things you remember on that page? And they have to say it back. And if it's not the things that you highlighted, then draw attention to those. And if it is awesome and they think of things that you wish that you had highlighted, you could go ahead and go back and do that. Now, of course, when you get to the end of the chapter, most of her chapters are 2 to 3 pages long, do it again and quiz them again. All of a sudden, you've put several strings on your beads, and they are going to remember so much more. Then tomorrow, when you open the book back up, you can quickly go back to all of your highlights and remember what you talked about, and you can quiz them. Now, if it were me, I would keep track of how many answers that my children give correct. And when they do really well, write it down. They just did great on a quiz, okay? If they didn't, you need to give some more review there, okay? But just the very simple act of quizzing them the next day will already be that review. So you're on the right path. How about on Fridays? To me, Fridays are a great day for quizzes. You could give maybe a written quiz, and this is for students that can read and write already. For the younger students, you'll have to be more creative, a lot more discussion, but that's a good thing. But say once a week, pick a day in your house that is quiz day and have lots of rewards ready, whatever the rewards are in your home, whether it's stickers or candy or all kinds of points that they can earn towards big prizes, things like that. But actual rewards, one day a week is a great time to actually start earning those rewards. You can do anything from a big piece of poster board with their names and lots of stars that they're earning and they're working towards, a really big prize, or just the act of putting that star on the wall is often the reward itself. At least I used to love stickers. Having a sticker book that they could put rewards in. But sometimes it's pretty fun to work towards a big prize, and you'd be surprised how motivated your children will be. But I like to just say pick one day a week that's going to be all of your tests and quizzes, and you can kind of work in our curriculum. Day 5 of spelling and math is our test day, so you might want to rearrange whatever day you choose to be day 5. Okay, it doesn't have to be a Friday. So the other thing is then monthly and quarterly, let's bring back the old tests and quizzes and let's have a cumulative review. By then, you're going to notice that if you were doing those first reviews I talked about, they're going to do really well on all the rest of them, and you're going to have great grades to be able to turn in to the government and the grandmothers and everybody else. So it all goes back to that beginning thing of highlighting. Now, if you have 20 highlights on every single page, you're not going to be able to put all of those on a cumulative review. So I would also keep with you in your teacher notebook, in the front pocket, I would put a little thing of sticky notes, and I would keep it handy. And when you see a really important fact, and a lot of these are brought out in the curriculum, such as dates and maps and places and really just important key people, I want you to put a sticky note on those. And there should be a lot fewer of those, but those are the things that you want to absolutely put on a cumulative test. So you're thinking through this as you talk and read and discuss with your children. You're planning ahead for the test, and then it's very simple to make that test and give it to them at the proper time. So here are some things that, besides just having a discussion and orally quizzing them and giving them that corrective feedback when they make a mistake, and I think that's awesome. You can also make flashcards. So especially those key points that have the sticky notes, you could make some flashcards and have your students review on their own. Okay, I want you to go sit on the porch. I want you to be there for 5 minutes. Or say, I just want you to go through on the porch. I want you to go through this stack of flashcards. And if you get one wrong, you have to put it in that pile. And if you get them one right, you put it in this pile. And let's see how many you can get in this pile and not that pile, okay? And your students will come back and tell you at the end, this is how many I did. So that's a simple thing. It doesn't take a lot of time for you. And you could even have your students make their own flashcards, because the act of writing it out will also be a huge help to them. Games. We have more games. If you're looking for games, here are where you're going to look for them in our curriculum at the present time. First of all, you're going to look in the arithmetic math drills. We have games every single day. Go make a list of those games. And the second place is in our spelling curriculum. Now, when that moves over to Word Power, I'm probably going to have to compile it in a different way on the website. So if you're watching this video later and you don't know where to look, you can contact us and we'll help you find it. But those games in both spelling and arithmetic can be used in any subject, and children love games. And if it's just you and your child, be creative in who else you can include on those games. Okay, if you bring in dad, your child's going to win every time because your dad, dad wasn't involved in all the discussions, but you might be surprised at how competitive dad will be when he's being quizzed with his children. So that's a fun way to do it if you only have a couple kids or one child and you cannot easily do all the group games. Another simple one is you're driving in the car, you're on the way to Walmart, and you say to your child, okay, we've got 3 blocks and we're sitting at a red light. Before that red light turns green, I want you to try to name as many things as you can think of that you remember from history this morning. And they're going to be like, oh, race the red light. And so they're going to be trying to do that. So those are some fun things. That's a game you can do in the car, but listing out what you have learned. By the way, when you go to Sabbath, you as a mom, and you're trying to remember what you've learned, take notes. That's good. It really is. But on your drive home or that night when you're laying down in bed, try to list out 10 things that you learned, and you'll be surprised at how much you retain. Do it that day. Don't let the sun go down, okay, on that. You definitely want to do it soon. It's a great reason for having discussions in the car on the way home from church, and not all negative, like all the things that were wrong that day, but just remembering, hey, I learned this. That was so cool to me. And hey, I learned that. And there are several people in our congregation I like having those discussions with, and it really helps us retain it. So if you're giving an actual written test and you're making up a test from all the highlights and the sticky notes and everything that you want your children to remember, I want you to know this. It's been proven that short answer and flashcards are a better form of test taking than multiple choice and true and false. I'm not saying you can never do multiple choice and true or false. I think children enjoy them and it gives a lot of, variety. But you as a parent, if you really want to know if they know it, check over here at the short answer, or just having to just give the answer without any kind of hint or help. They know it. So that's a better kind of test to actually know. You're teaching multiple ages. How do you know which facts your younger children need and which facts your high school students know? And I get this question all the time. How do I know that I'm actually making my high school student have a high school level education? And I'm just going to give you a clue here. It isn't really like that. There's not like some book out there in the universe that says all 6th graders at age 12 need to know these facts. I mean, people have compiled those lists, but that's just very subjective what their opinion was. Here's what I think. We've been talking about hear, learn, keep, and do. Hearing is the memorizing level. All ages need to memorize. It doesn't matter if you're 99 or 9. It just doesn't matter. So work on the memorization for everyone. And a lot of times we're easy on the little kids and we really should be harder on them. They can memorize. They can memorize a lot. Sometimes their brains are sharp and quick. And we just let them off too easily. So, and the high school students, the same thing. Because they're busy or they're in high school, we think that memorization is below them. So I say it doesn't matter what age the children are that you're teaching, they should all be memorizing the facts. Having said that, from there, the ability level changes. So everyone that can talk, and you may have children that struggle with this, should be able to speak back what they have learned. So that's an incredibly important skill. People talk about socialization in homeschooling, and one of the biggest things that makes your children look socialized is that they can speak clearly and confidently. And it's a battle for some of my children. So we all have to work on this area, but definitely that doesn't really vary by age, except that you're going to see that the more skill your children have, the more you should require of them. And I don't think that you should worry about what grade they are in this. All children need to work on this skill. All children need to also work on the ability to write clearly with good grammar and good punctuation and so on. And maybe if you struggle in that area, you might not even know what good grammar is, but just come take our Word Power courses and we'll help you with that. Having said that, you want your children to all be able to learn to write. So the younger the children are and the less ability they have in writing, of course, you're just going to work on the mechanics, first of all. You're going to spend more time teaching them good handwriting, having them copy scripture, having them learn their phonics and so on, then, and not necessarily using writing to test their knowledge. But once they have down the ability to write and it's becoming more reflexive and it's just automatic, then you can apply that writing ability to taking tests, okay? Now, one area that they could write very quickly would be spelling. Or things like math, that, you know, as they're learning to write their numbers, then you could absolutely use writing to test them in those subjects from a very young age. So writing as you get older, a short answer is great at all ages, okay? There's no age that's not good as you check their memory and what they've learned. But you also want them to be able to learn to write sentences, paragraphs, essays, research papers, and so on. So in our writing club for our high school students this year, our topic is going to be research papers. And if you would really like your older students to get a good grasp on how to do a research paper, then please have them sign up for our writing clubs. This is for Homeschooling Torah members, okay? Also, the final, to me, crown at the top of learning is that someone can teach what they have learned to someone else. So whatever age they are, I've been teaching my stuffed animals since like first grade, okay? It doesn't matter, again, what age they are, but definitely by high school age, you want them to be able to teach someone else. And you might have to be creative in how you come up with a way for that to happen if you only have one child. And by high school, often we have fewer children because the older ones may be often growing up and not in the home anymore. So one of the ways you can do it is simply take your camera and record them making a video and then play it back and evaluate how they did as they taught. And you can definitely improve those. They can make a PowerPoint presentation. One of the ways we can teach others is to make those notebooking pages that I constantly talk about. Have your children teach someone else with the notebooking page, and you might even want to present it to them in that way, that the reason you're making this notebooking page is because I'm going to show it to someone else and I want them to be able to look at it and know clearly what you learned today. And when they're done, you can sit together at the table and say, okay, I think you did great, but if I were looking at this and I didn't know the lesson, I would have some questions, and here is where I think you should add a little bit more information to the page, okay? You'll notice if character flaws like laziness come out here, okay? But definitely does all have to be at the same level. But once in a while, you want to check your children that they are able to teach what they have learned from you. And if you can get them in front of actual students, like children they might be their friends, cousins, or whatever, even grandparents, have them teach their grandparents. If actual live situation is the ultimate. So if it's a subject where they can give a hands-on demonstration and actually do something, then I recommend that as well, of course, because doing is the ultimate goal of learning, right? So the Bible says in Deuteronomy chapter 6 that we are to teach our children diligently, and it's talking the context of the Torah and God's commands, and absolutely that is incredibly important, but it can be applied to everything that they learn. So to teach diligently means to be consistent, to keep coming back to it. And I think that will reveal as parents our own character. It is really hard to be diligent. It's really hard to stick to a schedule and stay to it. But this is a character quality that we as parents need to develop in ourselves. So you need to make time in your schedule to diligently teach your children day after day after day. You need to be diligent also to write down their grades. Okay, you can't give a grade if you never write down how they did on one of those quizzes you gave them. And it's just not possible. And don't think you're going to remember later, because you're not. And you're just going to go, oh, they did fine. They got an A. Don't ask me how I know this. We also can average all of the grades that they've been given over, a set of weeks. And I'm real quick, let's talk about how to average. So to average, you just add up the score of all of the grades that you gave them, and then count how many grades there were. There may say there are 11. And you take the total number of all of those added up and then divide it by 11. So that's how you average. So you have to be diligent, and you have to be diligent in your schedule, that you teach them daily and don't get off track. And secondly, that you are diligent to write down how they did, or you won't have a grade to give. The Bible says to talk about things when we sit down. So after reading, we've talked about this already, you're going to talk about it. You're sitting around the table, you're sitting in the living room, at the couch, you're sitting in the car. All of these places that you're sitting is prime time. It also says to talk about when you walk. So that's obviously not going to be during school time. And then it says later to talk about things when you lie down. So that's like before bed, right? Those bedtime discussions are incredibly important. We're going to talk later in the week about setting up bedtime routines. And bedtime routines should include a discussion of what's been talked about that day. Short, sweet, very nice, but brought it back up again. And then it says when you rise up. So here we go. The next morning, we're rising up and we're reviewing back again what we learned the day before. Can you see how cognitive learning theory matches scripture? It's spaced out learning, and that spaced out repetition and review does help our children retain. Make sure that you take time to record all of this though. Record what you did, when you had those conversations. If you're in the car, that counts as school time if you write it down. If you don't write it down, it's not going to count. It's a little bit like keeping track of your checkbook, especially if you own maybe your own business or a farm and you can deduct expenses. So the IRS wants to know that you spent it, but if you don't write it down and keep the receipt, you can't claim it, or you're in big trouble if you try and they come back to audit you later. It's no different. It's the same kind of discipline and diligence that you need in homeschooling, and that's the key to grading. It really is. As far as in our home, we give a letter grade to percentage of how they did. So if you had 10 questions and they got 9 of them correct, that would be 90% of for a score. So that would be an A. 80s and above would be a B. 70s and above would be a C. I don't really keep track beyond that myself. I'm going for those 90s. When I see something in the 90s, I'm happy. And 80s even on some things. It depends on what your goal is, but I want to be able to give my children a 4.0 when they get to high school so they can get scholarships if they wanted to go to college. And the only way I'm going to be able to do that is, at least honestly, is to be able to test them and go for those 90s. So an A would be in anything in the 90s. I usually don't give letter grades in my home until my children are reading, so that I can give a fair test. Who needs it in first grade? It's not going to be turned into college. They're not going to ask. And sometimes you don't even need these until high school, but I like to do it younger just because I want to get in habit, just so that I'm in the habit myself of being diligent and writing things down. I need that to be an ingrained habit in my life. If I struggle in that area, it's not going to be very possible to give good transcripts when I get to high school. Can this work for other things that you're learning, such as character? Yes. So let's say your children are smart as a whip, but they're naughty, okay? So just make this a school subject. Let's see, we need to work on not talking back. When I give a command, I want them to answer with respect. That can be, define what your goal is so that you're going to know if they hit it. And then let's do some discussion. Let's start with learning some memory verses, memorizing them. So I have 2 books that I really love for this. That are very helpful for me when I have a character flaw I'm working on for my children or myself, and I can look them up and be able to go right to the scripture verses. One is this one for instruction in righteousness, and it's available at doorposts.net. And the other one is Proverbs for Parenting by Becker, and this one is available here or on Amazon. And those are just handy books. I have mine on my Kindle. You don't have to have yet another book on your bookshelf, but they're just handy to be able to look up quickly any kind of character thing. So have your children memorize those verses. Work on all of the things we said. Let's memorize those verses. Have them before that night be able to say it without help. It doesn't have to take all week. And then review it, at bedtime, review it the next morning when you rise up. Let's review it again later as you're driving around, and make sure that you could post it on the wall. You're going to remind them when they have trouble and they talk back. You're going to remind them of the verse they learned. Children, obey your parents or honor your father and mother would be a good example in this case. And you're going to have discussions about it. So don't think of it as yelling at your children when they have a bad character issue any more than you would yell at them for getting 5 times 7 incorrect on a math test. You wouldn't yell at your child for that. It's just childishness. They're working on it. It's a skill. So instead of yelling at them, let's have a discussion. Okay, so you learned that verse, Susie. Now, let's see, where did you do what that verse said? It's kind of obvious. And then let's talk about a way that before the next time you want to open your mouth and be disrespectful, how could you use this verse? And what could I do? Is there something I'm doing that's making you feel really angry and I could fix? Or what about maybe you're hungry? Would you use a snack? Or let's just have a discussion and help your children overcome sin instead of just beating them up for it, okay? Then how about reminding them throughout the week, this is what we're working on, praising them to dad or grandma when they're actually doing much better at this. Praise them to everybody you can think of. How about putting scores on a whiteboard, just like we were talking about for other grades? Put stickers up there when they're doing well. You could put it on the refrigerator. You could just have all kinds of rewards and prizes. You could decorate signs and put them on the wall. You could just do a notebooking page about it. You could have them do copy work about that verse. Just, there is no end. You could have them read books about biographies of people in history that had trouble with that. You can get a book from Christine Miller called All Through the Ages. That will have ideas. Also, Honey for a Child's Heart. I don't agree with everything in that book, but there are a lot of good ideas for teaching character in that book as well. So, in closing, don't forget to keep a portfolio of what your children have learned. Keep the quizzes, the tests, the writing samples, the notebooking pages. Put them in a binder at the end of a year, or when your binder gets too full. Transfer those over to more permanent storage, like up in the garage or the attic or down in the basement. Put them in a good tote or filing container is what I like, the kind of hanging files that you can put things in. Label things, keep them in order. If you really get behind when you had a baby, or you were moving, or some catastrophe happened and you just fell behind, just keep samples of a few things from that year and start fresh is what I would recommend. If you really have a whole day to devote to it, you could organize yourself, but I don't usually have that much time. So I just go, oh, well, we're going to try again this year. And I keep a couple samples from that year. Now, if the government requires it, you really need to be diligent about this. In conclusion, I promised you that I would talk about placing your children into Homeschooling Torah and how to know where to put them. And there's a couple things that I just tell my customers when they ask this question. First of all, in arithmetic, you can go to week 36, which is the last week of any level. Give your children those worksheets to do and see how they do. If they do well and it's kind of an automatic thing and they've got it down, Mom, this is so easy, then definitely go up to the next level. If they're struggling but they know it, then I would just have them repeat that level again. If it's language arts, there's a couple different things. If they're still learning their alphabet or cannot alphabetize things, then you could take letter magnets or flashcards or things like that and see if they can arrange them in alphabetical order and maybe time them and see how quickly they can do it. Those are essential skills for reading. And so from kindergarten through second grade, you want to really be working on that. And that helps you know how they're doing in reading. Honestly, I know it's crazy, but that's what the research shows. You can do some tests on our website to find out if your children are basing their reading more on phonics or sight word. And if they're still young enough and okay with doing reading instruction, you can do second or third grade of our curriculum as sort of a remedial and help them really solidify how we do phonics and how it works. So third grade to me is the ultimate remedial on our website, but you could also do second grade for quite a bit of review if they're really needing it and they're just struggling to read. If they're reading already and they're just solid in it and they're not needing much help, maybe once in a while they need help sounding out a big word, or they're just beyond the need for it at all, I would just put them right into word power 4 through 8, and I would not worry about what grade they are or anything. I think you could just kind of guess which one would be close to their normal age level and just put them right in. But make sure that they really are reading well before you do that. That's the key. We do review and learn a lot of Hebrew in our word power, and if they've never learned Hebrew, you can contact us and get a remedial Hebrew course, or join us on YouTube this year. We're going to be teaching beginning Hebrew, and you can just kind of skip that part of word power or just phase it in as they start to learn Hebrew. So don't feel like that's a make or break it for word power. No worries. And as Mom, I hope you'll join us as we learn Hebrew this year too. Basically, the other thing for language arts, you could also just not use word power at all and just go straight to our writing, our grammar, or our oral language curriculums, and you could use those at pretty much any age from, say, 4th or 5th grade up. You don't have to use word power. You can just concentrate spending a whole year on just writing or spending a whole year on just grammar. Those were written for those ages, not just high school. So don't feel that you have to do word power. You can just concentrate on that. As far as the other subjects, science, history, Bible, or anything else on our website, don't worry about what grade they're in. You don't need a placement test. Dive in and use all the things we've talked about today. And you just teach your children what is important, and you don't need a grade for that. You just don't. So I hope this helps you out. I hope that you will feel more confident in grading and knowing the reason why you're testing your children and not just doing it. Shalom. At HomeschoolingTorah.com, I have 4 things I want my kids to do with their Bibles every single day. First of all, I want them to memorize the Bibles. Your word have I hid in my heart that I might not sin against you. I don't want my kids to sin. I want them to have blessing on their lives. So we are constantly working on memorizing our Bibles. 2, I want them to copy their Bibles. Kings were required in the book of Deuteronomy to copy the entire Torah in their own handwriting and to carry a copy of that everywhere they went. I don't know how many of them did it, but I'm going to make sure my kids do it. I want them to be the most well-educated of all the citizens of God's kingdom. And so they copy it every day, starting from when they're very little to the time they're grown. They can copy massive sections of it, the Torah, the book of Proverbs, the entire apostolic scriptures, all of it if possible. 3, I want them to read their Bible every day. And so we have a schedule where they are assigned from about 3rd grade on. They read and read and read every single day. Before they go play, they're reading their Bibles. Before they read chapter books, they're reading their Bibles. Before they read man's literature, they're reading their Bibles. I want them to be able to say when they're grown that they have read their Bible through from cover to cover many times, not just once. And 4th, I want to discuss the Bible with my children. And I really value that because it says in Deuteronomy 6 that as we sit, as we walk, as we lie down, and as we rise up, we should be talking about the Bible with our children. So we want to be really intentional about it when we're in the car, or when we're on a walk, when we're looking up at the sky, when we're cooking dinner. All of these things should remind us of our Creator. And HomeschoolingTorah.com was developed to give you as a mom the tools so that you can do those 4 things with your children, and you'll never miss a day because we're going to remind you. And we're all going to be doing it together, and our kids are going to be raised up as mighty warriors for His kingdom.